I had the honor of meeting our next speaker back in 2015, and she applied to our graduate scholarship program. And upon reading her application, I knew that she would be someone who would be involved in the hobby well into the future. She's very passionate about learning and studying and observing how hobbyists in the aquarium industry and other hobbies passively and accidentally learn science. And so she had done poster presentations for us in the past. She was on stage at MACNA 2015 when she accepted the scholarship. Dr. Liz Marchio is now the Vertebrate Museum in the Southern, that's not right, because you're now at the Center of Science and Industry in Ohio, and she's here to talk to us about aquarium keeping, a science education via osmosis. I'd like to welcome Dr. Liz Marchio. Welcome, Liz.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming after lunch. Hopefully my presentation style keeps you awake. I do a lot of hand motions. I'm Italian, so. But yeah, today we're going to talk about aquarium keeping, a science education via osmosis. So, of course, osmosis is when you're interacting, or like there's a barrier and there's an interaction that goes across it. So for me, when I was thinking of this, is this interaction between the barrier of the aquarium, so the aquatic world, and then our world up here. So the more you interact with an aquarium, the more education you get passively, which we call latent education. So this is kind of all about how interacting with an aquarium can make you more scientifically minded, whether you like it or not. It kind of just happens that way. So what the lecture is all about is, well, I try to contextualize this with the theme is gathering and growing. So marine aquarists grow from humble beginners to levels that meet and sometimes exceed professional levels. So in case you haven't caught on, this is a compliment. This means that as you participate in the aquarium hobby, you can go above and beyond what scientists are even capable of. And a lot of this stems from your own personal interest and investment of time and also resources, money. And as aquarists, such as yourselves, develop, they grow into new participatory niches, and I'll explain what that means. This process of development includes learning and growing as an amateur scientist and eventually choosing to participate and specialize in a niche of interest. So that's a lot of big words, maybe, I don't know. But I'll explain what that means. So a little bit more, this is kind of what I want you to take away from this talk, is that aquarium keepers learn as they go. I'm sure many people here have had tank crashes and maybe a few tears. That's normal. Unfortunately, you just are experiencing the learning process of keeping an aquarium. So don't let anyone give you a hard time unless you just keep doing it and not learning from it, then that's a problem. But aquarium keepers learn as they go. Hobbyists often cite the progressive learning process and the challenges associated with the hobby, with discovery and curiosity as a major draw for participation. So hopefully this is kind of connecting some dots for you. Like, if you think back, like, why am I a hobbyist in the aquarium hobby? A lot of people tend to say it's because you get to learn continually. There's challenges that come up to you and you overcome them, and you're like, yes, I'm awesome, I overcame this challenge. And maybe you want to share it with somebody else. And then there's also discovery and curiosity, right? Because the marine realm is not a fully discovered place. You as an aquarist can get live rock in and maybe a macroalgae on there that's never been identified by another human being before. And that can sometimes be frustrating. If you saw Dennis's talk, he was talking about how he will sometimes refer to macroalgae by their common name, which scientists and science-oriented people don't like doing that because it's more general. But the aquarium hobby is able to push the boundary of science in a way that we just don't know these answers. We don't know how many different types of macroalgae there are. We don't have enough scientists actually studying macroalgae. So this is kind of a really fun aspect of aquarium keeping, especially in the marine realm, where there's a discovery and your curiosity kind of combine and kind of motivate you to keep going. And so this talk will cover the educational capabilities of aquarium keeping, the ways in which education is done, and how you can kind of leverage it to make more and better efficient choices in your hobby. So that sounds boring, but it's actually way more interesting. So just a little bit about me, like who am I? Maybe you don't know who I am. So Kevin said I got my, I got a scholarship from MACNA in 2015. That was kind of when I was deciding what to study for my PhD. So I have been integrated into MACNA since that point in time. Before that, my life history, for 10 years I kept aquaria and worked retail. I graduated high school in 2010. I went to school for a year and dropped out. And then I decided to work at every single pet store and aquarium store in Columbus, Ohio. That's where I'm from. So I worked at just a general pet store, and then I specialized into fish at Aquarium Adventure. And then I worked at Byerly's Aquarium Supply, and then Fishy Business. Two businesses, the latter two don't exist anymore, and that tends to happen. But the cool thing is that even in just Columbus, we have 3 specialty fish-only stores. So that means that there's enough aquarists that exist that are very specialized, and that we can have these special stores for just aquarists. I earned my Bachelor's of Science in Zoology at Ohio State. One trend you're gonna see is that I'm very academically oriented. This is how I identify as a child. I was smart, so this is how I proved myself in life. I just kept going. And so I earned my zoology degree at Ohio State, and then I had some mentors that told me, and I'm going into this in detail, not just as an ego stroke, but to tell you, like, this ties into the development of an aquarist towards a scientist, because I became a scientist. So when I finished my bachelor's degree at Ohio State, I had mentors that, they were like, you should go to grad school. And I'm like, what in that? I don't even know what that is. What's grad school? I just knew it was more work. And so they said, well, I met you at an aquarium store. Were you interested in studying fish or like aquatic life for a master's degree? And I was like, I don't know, sure. And so I started looking into it, and it made sense for me. And he also, this mentor, and I'm bringing up mentors because this is an important part of the development and education of someone who's into aquarium keeping and how we can make more aquarists. We need to reach out and touch somebody and help them along the way. So I decided to do ichthyology and biological sciences for my master's degree. And there I was trying to decipher between, so there was a monotypic species. That means there's a genus that has one species in it. And that's weird. Usually there's more species in a genus. So I'm like, okay, I think maybe there's more species in this one genus. There wasn't, but it was a lot of work for my master's. But so that's what I did for my master's degree. Is I was really into fish diversity, phylogenetics, that type of thing. And then I decided, hey, I'm just going to keep going for my PhD. And you'll see here it says recreation, parks, and tourism. Like, okay, she was studying fish. How'd she get into that? Well, my first year as a PhD student didn't go well. Like I said, mentorship is very important. My mentor wasn't great, and so I didn't want to pursue ichthyology any longer. I decided I was more interested in the development of how I got to that point. Why was I a female in a male-dominated field, going out mucking around, catching fish out of the wild, talking about them? That's kind of weird. So I decided to look at the development of people who keep fish in a fish tank. And the reason I chose the fish tank aspect is because of all this life history for 10 years. And before that, when I was a child, we had fish tanks in the house. So I'm like, I think they're correlated. And when I was doing my master's degree, I interacted with a lot of ichthyologists, and you get to know people, and a lot of them were aquarists. And I'm like, okay, I think this might be a thing. So that's when I started studying the leisure aspect of aquarium keeping. So you do it on your leisure time. You're choosing to do it. You're not forced to do it like in school, because when you go to school for science, man, it's really hard to sit there and listen to it, right? But if you can experience it and apply it, then you become more scientifically oriented. So that was the view that I took for the PhD. And I contextualized it in leisure and recreation because we had theories to use, and no one had ever looked at aquarium keeping as a leisure activity in that aspect before. So that is where this is all coming from and why I'm up here giving you this talk. And then from there, just to wrap up my career, I guess, I now am a researcher and program evaluator at the Center of Science and Industry, which is a big museum in Columbus, Ohio. So I'm basically applying all that stuff that I've did before towards science museum projects and programs to make sure we're making an impact in science on our populations we're trying to reach. Okay, so why study aquarium keeping? I mean, I kind of hope that I already persuaded you, but for me, it's because I had a personal history as a hobbyist. I had hypotheses already available. Like I said, I interacted with ichthyologists, and a lot of them were aquarists at one point. And I was also a community member. I was very active in the freshwater hobby. Aquarium keeping is an understudied wildlife trade. We need to keep in mind that a lot of these organisms they're wildlife. A lot of times we think of wildlife as like rhinoceros, an elephant, a giraffe. No, coral is an animal. It's wildlife. We are trading wildlife. And we have to keep that in mind because eventually people that are not really nerds about coral are gonna realize that it's not being monitored. We're able to bring in all these frags, all these coral colonies, other like fish species and stuff that they get through like wildlife checkpoints because they don't have a clue. They have no idea. So we just have to really be careful about how far to an extent we take our wildlife trade. We have to be responsible. I know that's not very fun, but we have to keep it in mind to keep this hobby going. And it's an understudied leisure activity. Okay, so this is a smattering of scientific papers. They're all from Andy Ryan, because he's done quite a thorough job of looking at different aspects of the aquarium trade. And Andy was one of the aquarists of the year, I believe. Okay, so what I have circled here are just different aspects of things we can pay attention to as aquarists. One is the appetite of our hobby. How many species, how many specimens do we take out in X amount of time? Is it sustainable? Then to the right, it says trade. Again, this is a wildlife trade. That also means that it's global. It's not just the United States, it's not just North America. We're bringing these specimens in from all over the globe. So what happens here is affecting what's going on out there. Sustainable exploitation. Are we making sure that we're not just taking all the things we can because we can make some money off of it? Then we have pests and invasive species. So sometimes we don't think fully about the organisms that we're keeping and where geographically we're keeping them. Again, this is not a fun topic to talk about, but if you're in Florida, Florida is a really cool place because it has every species imaginable from all over the world because things got loose. And the same thing happens for aquatic organisms. So if you're keeping a lionfish there and a hurricane comes through, oops, the lionfish is now an invasive species. And that's actually pretty much why they are there, because there was an accident. So we just have to be cognizant of how we're keeping these organisms geographically and just monitoring, how we are getting rid of ones we don't want and that type of thing. Global economics and technology is also an aspect we can look at under the aquarium hobby. Fisheries and the collapse of fisheries, how reef fishes, reef organisms are connected to the broader range of the ecology of the actual oceans, and US policy and the wildlife trade, which I've already touched upon. Other reasons to study the aquarium hobby or pay attention to the aquarium hobby in a little bit different aspect than we're used to is that this is pet expenditures from 1994 to 2015. This line going up, that is a positive correlation. So as time goes on, more and more money is being spent on pets. So yay, that's great for us, right? Because then that means that there's more things going on, there's more things available, but also we're still a wildlife trade. So we just have to keep that in mind. So this is kind of old data. This could be a little bit different after COVID, but the number of US households that own a pet, freshwater fish is number one, and this is in millions. Saltwater fish is a very respectable level down there. At least we're above horses. Then we have number of pets owned in the United States in millions. Freshwater fishes, again, very high. Saltwater fish is still respectable as well. So The one thing that I find very interesting is this top graph. It says number of households that own a pet fish, a pet fish. Who has one fish in their fish tank? Nobody. So this number is greatly deflated. It's actually much larger because a lot of people have multiple tank syndrome too, right? So yeah, you're checking off, yeah, I have a fish tank, but do you just have one fish tank with one fish? No, very unlikely. So the aquarium hobby itself is a huge economic driver for the United States, and we're taking in a lot of organisms. So we just have to pay attention to, how we're using them. Then we have saltwater and freshwater as far as aquaculture availability goes. I think I have this backwards. 90% of freshwater fish are available that have been bred in captivity. Saltwater is 90% are unavailable, so 10% are available that have been bred. This is probably actually inaccurate because this is an old slide. So these numbers, saltwater has made leaps and bounds in aquaculture. It's actually pretty amazing, and frankly, the aquarium hobby is a driver of that. So these numbers are not 100%, but you get the idea. Like freshwater also, one of the cool things too is the freshwater hobby is older than the saltwater hobby. It's easier, it was easier for people back in the olden days to get freshwater fish and keep them alive because you didn't need salt, you didn't need a lot of heat necessarily. So as time goes on, what was once a trade in freshwater fish that was all wildlife is now only 10% wildlife. So that tells us over time, as the hobby continues, whether it's fresh or saltwater, the number of wild animals is going to just naturally decrease because us nerds in here want to breed them, overcome the challenges, be the first person to be like, I bred this new species, and then it's only going to get better from there. We just have to find the balance. And then also another reason to study aquarium keeping, this is my paper. So this is the one paper that I really paid attention to getting out during my PhD, and it connects art, science, communication with aquarium keeping and conservation. So I threw the art in there because when you're keeping an aquarium, you're not just chucking some rocks in there and fish and calling it a day, right? You want it to look nice. So there's an artistic aspect that increases the level of engagement that you have with the fish tank, and then just like osmosis, the more you're interacting with that tank, put your hand in there, messing with stuff, paying attention and watching, making observations, maybe even writing it down and sharing it, is just going to increase your amount of knowledge about the system itself and the different organisms within it. Also, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. This is the same paper. In 2020, when I gave a talk online for MACNA, it had 16,000 views. This is open access too, so that variable kind of makes a big difference because people can read the paper without paying for it. And in 2022, it's up to almost 28,000 views. So someone cares about this type of stuff, right? And also, if you look over to the right, it says 98%. That means out of this one journal, this paper has more views than 98% of all of those papers in the journal. So that means only 2% of people are beating me with views. But what I'm trying to say is that it's a topic of interest to a lot of people. So if you're someone who is, in the career path right now, it might not be a bad idea for you to think about something like this as an area of study. And then one more impact I want to talk about with the aquarium hobby before I dive into the other more interesting stuff. I guess it's more interesting. I find this interesting. So if we define science as a leisure activity, we can use theories and ideas from the leisure field, because you can study leisure scientifically. That's what I did. And you can begin distinguishing turning points or career changes along a continuum of development. This can lend insight to why participants who are participating in the leisure activity plateau. They're not really doing a whole lot. They're just keeping the same old guppies or whatever. It might be an indicator of why people decline in participation, or it might show us why they're ceasing participation at all. If you're involved in an aquarium hobby or an aquarium club, then you've probably had conversations. How can we get more people interested in coming and being active in our club? So we have to, if we contextualize it and say, okay, why Why aren't people here? What is going on that can kind of help us increase participation? So what if we use this idea in science, and we can contextualize this too in aquarium keeping? If we look around the room, okay, so one of the things I looked at, and I'm just critical all the time, we are at the banquet, we had Aquarist of the Year. What did you notice about the demographics of that? Male, white. I'm not saying that's bad, I'm just saying it's a thing. So why aren't we having more females increase? Why don't we have a lot of other races here increasing? That's just anecdotal, but still, it makes you think, what might we not be doing to promote people in the hobby? And science has the same problem. We are a very white male-oriented thing. So, what's going on? How can we look at this and diversify? And I'll talk a little bit more about the importance of diversity as this talk goes on. So, what roadblocks are there for underrepresented groups and other diverse viewpoints in the hobby and in science? What barrier is there? So when she's going doo-doo, and then just hits it and decides, I'm not even gonna deal with this anymore. So by contextualizing the aquarium hobby as a scientific activity, we can use scientific theories to see, what might be hindering people from participating. Okay, so we had those 3 topics I was interested in having me talk about and you learn about today. Aquarium keepers learn as they go. Okay. That is called informal science learning, ISL. And this is experiential learning. That means you're learning as you experience things. And for a lot of this talk, you're gonna see me pulling quotes and pictures from tanks of the month, because these are it's a huge resource of data, frankly, because people are just laying their heart out there. How did you start in the hobby? And they're very open and honest with putting it out there. So as aquarium keepers learn as they go, it's one of the main tenets of what these threads will tell us, this data. And then also, as they're learning, they start being interested in certain aspects. Like this aquarist said they said they were really interested in the do-it-yourself aspect of it. It was a driving force with their little micro tank. It was partly out of necessity to do it yourself because there wasn't any products. So you're pushing the boundaries, right? That's fun, when you're pushing the boundaries. And also just for the fun of it. Maybe you are more mechanically inclined and you're like, okay, I like engineering and plumbing things together and using glue and almost dying from glue overdose. You're doing something interesting with your time. So just to have you think, compare what you know now in the hobby. You're all here, right? That means you're advanced in the hobby enough to pay money, to travel, to be at a specialized conference. Think about how you got here. Did your hobby knowledge increase from the beginning? You probably weren't born knowing about fish tanks. So you probably started at 0. And then now you're at, I don't know, whatever you're at right now. Did your hobby skill increase? Maybe you were fragging coral with a hammer and just great, you made 20 frags that are all gonna die, but then you start understanding, okay, I can use my skill, use bone cutters or a saw to really get in there and cut the frag in a way that is going to make sure that it doesn't die, and maybe you can make a bunch of ones that do live. So does your hobby skill increase as you participate? Does your hobby awareness increase? A lot of things we talk about, like sustainability of the aquarium hobby. You probably didn't even know that when you're at whatever aquarium shop, and you're like, oh, that's cheap. That's not bad. Because you're motivated by prices, or you're motivated by what you really want and desire. But as you participate in the hobby, you're like, oh, that's probably not the best choice. Like a bicolor angel into a reef tank. Might work, but also, you gotta think about your awareness of the hobby. So overall, think about it. Did your science or conservation knowledge increase over time? Most of you probably answered yes in your heads. I didn't hear anyone say yes, but that's okay. This development of knowledge, skill, and awareness is mirrored in career development scientists, and it's specifically in STEM fields. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about STEM fields because it's a good selling point, frankly. So if we want to make an impact on the next generation, we got to look at what they're learning and what we're focusing on. And we're focusing a lot on STEM and STEAM, which is STEM with an A, and that is art. So if we want to start making an impact on the next generation or on just people, thinking about it with this acronym is not a bad way to go. So the STEM means science, technology, engineering, and math. And if you've been here for the entirety of the conference, you can think back on the different talks. Okay, yeah, like Nicole's was about engineering, and she had like all these schematics. I'm like, geez, this woman is, wow, impressive. But this is a STEM field. She's leveraging that to do better in the hobby and to help you do better as well. And if you go down to up to the vendor hall, look at all the different technology that's there. Think about how that's changed. We had like under gravel filters back in the day. Oh my gosh. Now we have like such amazing technology through engineering. And this is all from people being interested in improving how we take care of these organisms. So informal science is that you choose to be here. You chose this. That means you like it. If you didn't like it, you don't have to be here. So if you're here, that means you're enjoying it. And you've chosen to persevere through challenges. Just by definition, we all have challenges, and you persevered through them, and it makes you more interested sometimes in continuing. You chose how you participate in the hobby. So one of the things, too, that is going to happen is your little brain, maybe you have a big brain, but your brain's going to just keep growing and growing and growing with knowledge. More and more knowledge, it's just going to want to shoot out, and it does. It shoots out into these different specializations. So, like Alyssa has her seahorse farm. Did she start out with seahorses? I kind of doubt it. I think probably she accumulated a bunch of knowledge, and she's like, seahorses. And there she ended up. And then we have like Dennis, who has his tanks, and he was very interested in the visualization of it, making it beautiful. And then eventually, like COVID happened. I think he just accumulated knowledge, and macroalgae happened. So you get to choose how you participate in the hobby. Just kind of go with the flow of what you're interested in. And that comes from the accumulation of knowledge over time. And as a hobbyist, you must learn science to participate. Whether you like it or not, you're not going to keep a live fish in an aquarium unless you understand and can apply the nitrogen cycle. You have to be able to understand the needs of coral as well, lighting, water chemistry, compatibility. You're going to eventually get to know the anatomy of these things. All sorts of things. Like, science just comes in whether you like it or not. And if you can contextualize it as a scientific activity, sometimes you can leverage it to do even better in the hobby. And also, you can choose to follow your passion into a career of choice, and specifically science here. So on the left side, you guys know what that is? It's a mouth-brooding fish. I put that up there because, man, it blew my mind when I realized that fish do that. I'm like, first of all, the female sucks up sperm and has it in her mouth. All right, that's weird. And so I'm like, all right, that kind of hooked me in, as gross as that sounds. But still, like, that is so interesting that these fish are harboring their eggs in their mouth. They're raising the babies in there. So just observing your hobby and understanding biology, reproductive cycles can kind of just make you into some, I guess, a weirdo, but also someone that could use that for a future use in some way. Yeah, maybe I'll be an expert in mouth-brooding fishes. I don't know. The other one is just a schematic of ecological system of the marine realm. Ecologists, they know a lot of information about a lot of things, but ecology is another realm of science that is completely possible in studying. Okay, so I keep talking about science. What is it? We throw that around so much. Yeah, science this. Dr. Fauci's a scientist. Okay, what's that mean? Science is often thought of as something that smart people do. I'd love to say, yeah, I'm super smart. And it's just not. It's not something that smart people do. It's what curious people with grit and determination do. And if you think about how you get in the aquarium hobby, you're persevering through challenges. you have grit and perseverance, you do, and you're learning science, so guess what? You're part scientist. So you can also think about the very first scientists, they were not PhDs. That didn't even exist. So Aristotle wasn't Dr. Aristotle. He was just some random dude who had a lot of leisure time to just sit there and contemplate about life. And you'll also notice that a lot of scientists, the beginning ones, were male because they were the ones that were afforded the most amount of leisure time to be able to sit and think and postulate about life. Or maybe we just lost a lot of the women's stories along the way. Either way. So there's the leisure component and sitting and thinking about the world, becoming a scientist. And I just want to make sure you know, like, scientists aren't just like gods or something. This is a thing that we created as humans, a professional field, and that you can get there eventually if you want to, and you probably are already partly the way there, whether you know it or not. Okay, and then some other like more definitive definitions of science. So when I'm talking about learning about science, I'm talking about your understanding that science is a process. It's not just facts that some smart person told you. That smart person accumulated these facts. They're not proof either. They're barely even called facts. That's why I have it in quotes. Through this process of gathering information. So yeah, it's going to get a little boring right now. We got making an observation, getting an area of research, and doing a background understanding or a lit review, and understanding all the different things that could be going on. Then you have a hypothesis. Then you test with an experiment, analyze the data after you collect the data, report your conclusions. And then that little green circle is very important. This is an iterative process. It doesn't stop. So all these facts that we are accumulating, all these pieces of information, we just keep asking ourselves over and over and over again if that's true. So science is a process. It's an accumulation of facts that we have not said, that we haven't disproven yet, essentially. And these facts and processes make up scientific fields. So that's kind of what science is. And the scientific fields, I call them ologies, like biology, ecology, geology, ology. Ology means the study of. So I like talking about this because a lot of people are put off by scientific words. But scientific words are usually just two words stuck together, and they mean two different things. You smack them together, and you get a whole new word. Like biology, life, the study of. Biology is the study of life. So it's not really that hard. You just have to know that scientific words can be broken down. But ologies are different types of studies that you can do as a scientist. So maybe you're keeping an aquarium or like diving or something, and you're seeing these really cool things. You're like, what is going on? Like you're having this little peek into this whole other realm, right? That's kind of the fun part of having an aquarium, is that you don't necessarily have to go down there and be with these things. You can bring them up and take a good look, like, a centimeter away from them as they're doing these weird behaviors. So that's also one of the most important parts of the aquarium keeping hobby, is that you get to have an up-close interaction with some of these organisms that no other person is going to be able to do. Like if you're scuba diving, you're going to be disturbing them. In an aquarium, they get used to you, and they usually have pretty valid, accurate behaviors to what they do in the wild. So you can use your aquarium to okay, what's going on? So this would be ethology, the study of behavior. You can look at this pom-pom crab. What's it doing? Is it dancing for a partner? Is it collecting food for its little friends and using those as a defense mechanism? Is it just rooting you on to have a good day? These are hypotheses that are driven from making observations from your aquarium. And then on the other side, if you really dive deep into these different ologies, you can start studying them as a very studious person who wants to get paid, essentially, to study this stuff. So there's diversity of biology. You can study phylogeny, how things are related. Like, why is this fish related to that fish? Ecology, behavior. You can look at just larval fish. How cool is that? or just flatfish. So these different fields can also be specializations as well. Okay, one of the second takeaways is that hobbyists often cite the progressive learning process of keeping an aquarium and learning along the way, and the challenges and the discovery and the curiosity as a major draw for participation. So up here I have different ichthyologists. Jack Randall. There's Gil Rosenthal, who's a freshwater ethologist. He studies freshwater fishes. He found out that male mollies will pee in front upstream from females. And the females are like, yeah, I know that pee, and they will know that that's the male from their species. Their pee is species identification level type thing. Yeah, so, he's an interesting person. Who doesn't like studying fish pee? But, he kept aquariums as a child. He was really interested in the aquarium hobby. He was in Pittsburgh. He was in the club there. So it just kind of blew out and went crazy. He decided to do it as a career. And then there's Prasanta Chakrabarty and Kevin Conway. Kevin Conway is an ichthyologist who studied and described many different fish species. Prasanta runs the LSU Natural History Museum. And each of them, I don't think Prasanta actually had aquariums. He said that he was a very landlocked individual with not a ton of extraneous resources like money or time to have an aquarium. So he was mainly developed from interacting with museums. So that's also another thing, is as you're developing as a little larvae human into an adult, not just aquariums help you become more fishy oriented, but having a mentor, going to museums, being outside, going fishing. It kind of depends what your resources are. Okay, so here's some data from Aquarius that kind of show some of the points that I'm making. So like I said, these are mainly tank of the month postings. And this one is from 2003, because I was real curious if things have changed over time, like maybe I'm just blowing hot air and this is just a new thing, but no. So this person said when they started out purchasing supplies to create their reef, they had no idea how important this hobby would end up being for them. Now, well over a year later, they have all the scientific names of coral burnt into their memory. So they started with zero knowledge, and now they have a bunch of knowledge. So that's showing some accumulation. There's no follow-up to this, but maybe this person decided, I'm really into coral, instead of just like a coral and fish tank. Maybe they started, I don't know, doing whatever they want to do with coral. Maybe they try to breed them or something. But you can see that there's a progression, zero knowledge to some, and then that can kind of spiral out of control into a specialized field. And this person said, little did I know what started off as a free tank and a couple of clownfish would develop into a lifelong passion. I hear this kind of a lot. You get a free tank, or one of the things that people seem to be most embarrassed about is I got a goldfish from the fair. Cool. Yeah, okay, ethically not that cool, but if it gets people into the hobby, it's an interesting aspect of how people, you're getting something for free, you're then giving a crap about it, I guess, and you're trying to keep it alive, and then during that process, you're learning and growing. I don't know, free clownfish, that's a pretty good deal. So this is just a little bit more what this person said. They said their roommate gave them the tank, and then we had to think about too, that roommate quit. Someone else quit in order to make this other person into an aquarist. So that kind of brings in why are these people quitting? Maybe they don't have enough grit, determination, and perseverance. It's possible. So he says, seeing your hard work come to fruition is really rewarding. You're putting a lot of time, effort, money into this. You want something to come out of it. Maybe not something you can get monetary value for, but you don't want just dead coral or algae or a fish with its eye popping out because it's sick. That's a bummer. So there's a feedback loop essentially. And a lot of people also say it's a very relaxing aspect. So taking care of these organisms and the system itself can be very relaxing. And there's actually a term for that. It's called flow. It means that the challenge is matching with your experience of it. So you're finding flow. It means that time goes by, and before you know it, 3 hours have gone by. You've just been staring at your fish tank. So that's a thing that happens, and that means you're in it. And that, I think from what I understand about other aquarists, including myself, time is gone. Before you know it, your wife or significant other's like, hello, it's dinner time. So, that's what finding flow is all about, and that happens quite a bit. And also one of the other things is that we can leverage aquarium keeping for children who have sensory issues. So if kids are overwhelmed with life, maybe autistic, whatever, I'm overwhelmed with life sometimes. So if too much is coming at you, an aquarium might actually help them just settle down and focus them. So there's a whole psychological aspect to aquarium keeping as well. And then one of the last things that they say on here is that community is very important. So, we're here living that exact thing, right? We're gathering and growing. We're here together as a community, bouncing ideas off each other, talking about our woes, whatever. We're all together, and that makes a huge difference as well to keep people going in the hobby. And frankly, for scientists as well. We all get together and have conferences too. So scientific conferences, MACNA has done a very nice job of making it very complimentary to a science conference where we have lectures. We don't have a vendor room. Okay, I lied. We do have vendor rooms usually, but they're a little bit more boring and like pit tags or other things that you need to monitor species or whatever. And there's also poster sessions and scientific conferences, and there's poster session here. So y'all are experiencing science, whether you know it or not. So this is a picture of a tank from 2022. I just like this picture because it's really showing a lot of what this person is doing in their life. You got aquariums, yeah, okay, but what else is in that picture? What do you see? You got plants? You got a lot of plants. This person is into plants. You got a picture back there of macroalgae, like a scientific illustration. Like this person is in it. So I can't really say from just a picture whether this aquarium hobby made them into this plant nerd or if the plant nerd came first, but it's definitely something that's driving their participation. So here's another tank of the month from 2022. Again, I love putting a nice picture up there that shows a lot of stuff that you can think about, right? Yeah, there's a cute dog. Actually, it's a really cute dog. Then you have this sleek, nice tank. Very well taken care of. Maybe they did it just for the picture, but either way, it looks really nice. Then you have this nice aquarium. They've chosen really nice for aesthetic value, what it looks like. Then look underneath, what we got. We've got chemicals. Hey, science. We've got a dosing system. We've got some type of controlling of the whole different variables that are in the system. That's science right there. This person is sciencing hardcore without even knowing it. And then they got their plants and the books. It's the whole thing. And this person was asked, what do you love most about the hobby? And they love that it's so diverse, probably species diverse. They love that it's a challenge over and over continually. They discover new things and new animals, and the community. So there's always people willing to help and encourage and makes you just feel integrated and wanted to be here, right? Here's another tank. Again, I'm a big fan of like developmental series. So just seeing, the humble beginnings and then what it comes out to be is pretty cool to watch. And this person said it wasn't a smooth journey. Things die, right? But my love for the hobby motivated me to get where I am right now. So overcoming challenges. Okay, last tenet of things I want to talk about, the educational capabilities. You're probably putting this together already. Like, how can we educate people or use these things to educate? And I'm not saying that aquariums have to be educational, but if we want to reach out to the next generation, it's good to contextualize the aquarium as an educational thing. That way we can, it's going to sound terrible, infiltrate schools, put an aquarium in there. Don't just dump an aquarium in a school, by the way. That is a great way to make a lot of people angry and make the teachers do a lot more work. You want to be a mentor to a school and help them. And you can contextualize the aquarium as a scientific learning tool. So we've got the scientific process that's completely possible to do when you're teaching people. And this doesn't have to be like little kids. It could even be university kids. It could be anybody really that has zero knowledge of aquariums. It doesn't have to necessarily end with a career path in science. That'd be great, but it's fine. You know, if we want to just think about this as furthering our hobby, cool. If we want to think about it as furthering science, great. If we want to think about combining both of them, I think that's probably the best way to go. So there's educational capabilities of aquarium keeping. There's different ways you can do it, and you can leverage science as a way. Yourselves leverage science as a way to make more efficient choices in aquarium keeping. So this is a picture from yesterday's lecture by Nicole, who is this engineer, the systems engineer, I think. And she, man, made these really cool models and like just some intense things that she's done because she leveraged science, engineering, technology to make her aquarium better. And then she did part of the scientific process of reporting her conclusions to us to help us. So she's doing science herself and also telling us about it. And like she made pretty clear, like this isn't final. It's always a work in progress. So if you're looking at the scientific method, that little green arrow, little circle with the arrow right there, it's iterative, it's improving over time. We're just accumulating more and more evidence towards one end result. So this is Brandon Rutherford. He is, this is old. This is like 2015. I'm not sure if he's still doing this program. So he was bringing aquariums into the classroom in order to teach kids about all sorts of things. Again, like I said, aquariums are great for kids because it can relax them as well. So if you have a problem child, go to the aquarium nook, take 10 minutes, and maybe they'll chill out, right? You make sure they don't throw anything in there or anything like that, but it might be a helpful thing in that respect as well. So when you're teaching people using an aquarium, or you're trying to teach yourself, you can take different approaches. There's a system approach. I made these up, so these are just things that are possible. You can look at the system itself and see how it works all together. You can look at the taxa. That taxa mean different species. So it could mean coral, it could mean fish, it could mean whatever you're looking at. You can take a taxa approach and focus on the organisms and teach biology, teach anatomy, teach behavior, compatibility, all sorts of things. The ologies approach, you can look at it like from an ecological perspective, biological, any ology would probably be possible with an aquarium. And then the scientific process approach as well. And again, kids, you want to keep it informal to an extent because you don't want it to be work. No one really wants to just learn all the time in the context of having to learn. It's fun to learn when you don't feel like you have to, right? So you want to try to mentor students into, bring them in. And when I say students, I don't necessarily just mean kids. It could just mean a new aquarist. You want to keep it fun. Don't tell them what to do. Let them make mistakes. Have some agency and choice about what they're doing because that brings in the leisure aspect of it. But also promote responsibility. So by focusing on an organism's attributes, this is like the taxa biological approach, people can be introduced to scientific concepts as well, such as species and biodiversity. So this quote is, "In the years that followed, I became more and more accustomed to the tank's requirements, and more information on stony corals became available to me." So they were interested in stony corals, and then once you started diving into that, you're kind of in it, and then you're finding even more things about it. Also, you can leverage aquarium keeping in the genetics component as well. So if you're a teacher and you want to teach genetics, why not use clownfish or some other organism that's breedable in captivity? It's just kind of amazing. We started out with Nemo being wild caught, and now Nemo's like unrecognizable essentially, but it's really cool. So in the end, there's different specializations that you can have through different scientific viewpoints of how you're taking this. So if you're filling your brain with all this knowledge about aquariums, maybe it'll squirt out into a macroalgae tank like Dennis's. where, that's his specialization. That's his niche. He even said that in his talk. Like, this is his niche right now. It doesn't mean you're always in it. It means you can change it, but it's a very specialized place you can be. And that comes also with then you can find that you are then the guru of this new niche. Like, he was up here giving us a talk about it. He might not have realized that he was going to be that ever. So if you start pushing boundaries into different specializations in the hobby, it might become something that you weren't even planning. Also, like micro tanks, I love this little tank. I'm totally going to buy one. It really just encompasses a lot, challenge especially. The smaller you make your ecosystem, the more challenging it is to keep. And I honestly don't have a tank right now set up. And I think it's probably just because the fun aspect has wavered and the challenge aspect has also wavered for me. So I think this might be a key to getting me back interested in keeping an aquarium in my home. But this is another niche, right? You're taking a full-size tank and just squishing it down into a more challenging ecosystem. And then, the people that make this type of stuff have also found a niche where they can create these things for other people and give them information about them, become the guru. So in the end, I just want to make sure you remember that 10% of the US population is invested in keeping an aquarium already. That's how many people in the United States keep an aquarium, 10%. Maybe it's a betta and a bowl, but it's still an aquarium. So these, by contextualizing leisure and science together, might be able to leverage people into being better aquarists, which also correlates to being scientists as well. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. The publication I talked about is open access. If you just look my name up in Aquarium, it'll come up immediately. And then if you're ever in Columbus, Ohio, we have a really big science museum there, and that's where I work now. And I love talking to people when they come in, so email me or something, and I can show you around and give you a viewpoint of it. There's always kids doing cartwheels in the halls, that's as informal science as you can really get. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate your time.